Federal prosecutors have just charged 9 members of the right-wing militia known as the Oath Keepers. The attack on the Capitol led to the deaths of 3 police officers. The militia members are charged with conspiring to, quote, corruptly obstruct, influence, and impede an official proceeding, that is, Congress's certification of the Electoral College vote. According to the charging documents, the members agreed not to carry guns because they had a, quote, listen to this, heavy quick reaction force 10 minutes out, though. The same Oath Keeper also sent a message saying, quote, Trump said it's going to be wild. It's going to be wild. He wants us to make it wild. That's what he's saying. He called us all to the Capitol and wants us to make it wild. Sir, yes, sir. Gentlemen, we are heading to D.C. Pack your expletive. HuffPost senior justice reporter Ryan Riley has been like an insurrectionist encyclopedia, reporting on the hundreds of charges that have resulted from the attack on the Capitol. He's here now to explain these new charges. Ryan, what's the overview here of these individuals?
Yeah, I mean, so they're from all over the country. We have someone in Florida, someone in North Carolina, a group in Ohio, and they're all coming together and sort of coordinating through the Oath Keepers, which of course is this sort of right-wing group that's been around for over a decade now, and talking about and basically listening to Trump's calls and hearing that message and him saying it's going to be wild, listening to that, interpreting it, and acting on those efforts. I think one really interesting thing is when they talk about this idea of them having this quick reaction force, there's also a lot of discussion about not bringing guns because they were worried about DC gun laws. And it's pretty hard to not reach the conclusion that, fear of DC's gun laws saved some lives that day, because that's the reason why a lot of these people didn't bring guns into DC, because they were worried that police were going to pick them up before they got anywhere. But because we saw a lot of people come in with tasers and things like that were legal, there was nothing really police did, or I guess suppose could have done, to stop them, because of what they were carrying was street legal at the time.
That is a fascinating observation. Also, I mean, that B-roll we were just playing, which again, if we can play that for a second, which is this sort of notorious moment captured on film, the stack it was called, and you see these folks, they've got vests, they've got helmets. They got their hands on each other's backpacks as they sort of make their way up very methodically and slowly. It strikes me that these folks are in a different tier than some of the more, look where I found myself with my iPhone folks. These were people that plotted quite seriously, coordinated, had some experience, and came kind of very ready for what they were going to do.
Completely. It was a pre-planned conspiracy as opposed to a spontaneous conspiracy that just sort of formed on that day. I mean, it's pretty tough to argue that when you see all these communications about the event beforehand, and then when you see that formation going up the stairs, I mean, that's a specific conspiracy that they've entered into. We are agreeing to do this together, right? You're literally signifying that with your body language and what you're doing. So, I mean, that's the conspiracy right there. They've entered into this agreement, and they tried to stop the Electoral College votes from being certified.
And that is what the charging is, right? I mean, you've got federal charges on the 9 of them as a group in this case.
Yes, yeah. So they're all together. And I mean, conspiracy charges make it easier to bring, culpability to people who might not be able to be charged on their own. And, they can be controversial sometimes. So we saw in the J20 case back during Trump's first inauguration, where there were these conspiracy charges that were brought based on very little conduct. You'd be curious to see what prosecutors have learned from that experience and bringing it to these new charges where they have very specific actions that these individuals took to enter into this conspiracy to overthrow democracy.
It seems to me that federal officials, law enforcement, are kind of climbing the ladder of seriousness. Last question for you. Do we have any updates on the pipe bomber? I mean, we have someone on tape leaving what were functioning active pipe bombs outside the RNC and DNC. A month later, we have not found this person.
We don't. I mean, I just would stress that this isn't a completely overwhelming event. I mean, frankly, it's just completely dominating the FBI. Yeah, there's so many cases. It's impossible for journalists to keep up with. It's impossible for a lot of these outside groups to keep up with. There were just so many people committing crimes that day. And because no one was gathered up and arrested on the spot, it requires all of this work to go through and figure out, okay, who are the most serious charges? So right now you're going to see that mix of very serious charges and people they're going after, like we see with the Oath Keepers, but also just sort of the layup easy cases of people who, were really dumb and posted about it immediately afterwards on social media. So it's a real mix right now, what we're seeing.
Yes.